So I have a lot of fun with programming now, but like you were saying, I have a lot of hobbies. So
Yeah.
I don't just do programming as a hobby. In fact, I only recently started doing programming as a hobby. And I think it's really important to it's something you need to pay attention to is the potential for burnout. If you're programming all day at a job and then you program it as a hobby, you want to be careful that you kind of don't end up making yourself feel like you're working for 16 hours a day. you know
Yeah, and I think it's one of the interesting parts of adult life, like if you went to university, like post university adult life is two things. One, finding interests and activities and hobbies that aren't work, and two is friendship. So like some of
Mm-hmm.
these things just get thrown at you in your youth and early adulthood, but now it's like I'm in my 30s. And I'm not just going to walk out into a coffee shop and find somebody like, will you be my friend? Like it's a bit
Right.
more involved than that. So that's a different talk. But the hobby one is really interesting because we have more and more limited time. And if anyone's ever interested in sourcing, this is all I'll say for the non-code, if you really just want to fill your time with a
Right.
completely new thing, a new non-code hobby, there's a lot of things people drift to, which are fine. Like I played guitar since I was a teenager, and some
Mm-hmm.
people do homebrew or like maybe whittling if they're extravagant, or lock picking. I did a bit of that. But there's a lot of people who drift to like a few things, and a lot of people drift to them, but there's a lot that are actually needing like human resource. So I don't know if there's something like this in the States, but in the UK, there's an actual charity that tracks professions or skills and ranks them by extinct or endangered or threatened, like you would animals.
Hmm.
Hundreds of things. I'm
Wow.
talking like Devon stave basket making, like things
Yeah.
that like 300, 500 years ago were like required, but now the knowledge goes away. So like think
Yeah.
about how we know how to do Ruby. Well, parchment making, lots
Mm.
of people would have had a business. Now there's one, maybe two left in the UK, but it's an ancient vellum and parchment making. And they're
Right.
only alive because I think all laws are still meant to be printed on parchment. I think a lot of weddings use parchment for something. I think some furniture uses it, but like there's dozens or hundreds of them. And the list, like ones where like there's a population that's known as like 8 hobbyists,
Mm-hmm.
and then, or like 2 professionals, 8 hobbyists. And you could find, if you're in the UK, look this up. I will, if there's somewhere I can like put a reference later. I don't remember the name of this charity, but I was reading about it in The Economist. But I love this idea of like taking out the, like what's cool to try and do to not make money.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when people pick university degrees when they're 18. There's about 30 things people are interested in, but there's about 3,000 things they could go into. Similar with hobbies, there's
Yeah.
areas where you could be really good at um compass, like traditional compass making,
Mm-hmm.
and go out and be a part of a really small community doing something that is needing help to stay alive, right?
Right.
So anyway, there
So
you go.
yeah. So Colin says I read old Ruby books most of the time after hours, and maybe play in IRB with things I'm reading from those old books. As one of my hobby approaches, I try to be mindful of how much time I'm spending staring at a screen after work hours. Yeah. So that's one of those. That's one of those work but not work hobby type things. I'm learning some cool stuff. I'm getting into some history. I know you like the old Ruby stuff. So I'm guessing that's kind of one of your hobbies too, that area of thing.
Yeah, and by the way, I've talked to Colin about this. He has a great Ruby book collection. He gets the secondhand ones. I think, Matt's probably has the biggest one because he's very big about getting every book he can. And Japan has a lot of Ruby books.
Mm-hmm.
But Colin is probably number 2 in people. I know that like if there's a book that has a hard copy floating around, he's got it. And some are quite good and hard to get. Like Metaprogramming Ruby second edition's like 10 years old, and it costs more now used than it did new, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great one. And yeah, like you said, digging through I mean, I've done talks about it. It's really unhealthy, like digging through old code. But there's something interesting about the old code where Ruby's not changed that much. So it is possible to find interesting code that is useful to us now.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Or at the
I
very
found
least,
like
interesting thought approaches.
yes. Oh yes, we're very idiomatic now. We have linters that push us into a specific corner, which is fine. So we can read each other's code. However, people get ideas about ways to write this language that's meant to be expressive and diverse, and they, you know, you need to go to, I don't know, if you went to Newcastle, England from Miami, there'd be a very different way to talk using the same language, right? Different dialects. And I think that's something we can explore.
And I think that's something important too. If you're gonna do hobby programming, one of the things that I think would be very beneficial is to do something in an environment that you don't do at work, because it'll help you learn different ways of thinking about code. I mean, that was one of my primary reasons for going to the game coding in Ruby, because it's a very different way of thinking about code than web apps. Same language, but very different thinking mechanisms going on in those things. Or, you know, go learn Rust. It's different types of coding. Learn C# or something, you know, just to get different ways of thinking.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.